So we shift this discussion from the law of demand to looking at the demand curve, and we have two things that I want us to distinguish. And this is one is called a movement along the demand curve, and the other one is a shift in demand curve. So we start here. We have movement. So here is the first concept, movement along the demand curve. So a movement along the demand curve is basically is the effect of a change in the price of a good, which produces a change in the quantity demanded. So if there is a change in the price of a good, and that could be an increase in the prices or a decrease in the prices of goods and services, then we see that produces a corresponding change in terms of the quantity demanded. So demand in itself has not expanded. There is no increase in the overall demand itself. It is what has happened is a change in prices of goods and services that is producing a corresponding change in terms of the quantity demanded, the number of units demanded by the consumers. And this can be explained in a curve as follows. So this is our demand curve. We had on the x-axis, this is y-axis. Here we had price in Kenya shillings, and here we had quantities in number of units. This was the shape of our curve. So this is demand curve, demand curve. For example, let's calibrate. Let's say this is 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Then this is 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35. So those are the values in terms of quantity demanded and corresponding prices. So we are saying a shift, not a shift, but a movement along the demand curve is the effect of a change in the prices of goods and services. For example, let's say at price 10, so you draw like this to correspond to the curve, you find that the quantity demanded will be about somewhere there, which could be 6 units. Let's call this point A. Then this price drops from 10 Kenya shillings to about 2 Kenya shillings, which if we plot corresponds to 25 units. And this becomes point B. First, we are seeing that at a higher price, less units are demanded. At a lower price, more units are getting demanded. But then a price change from 10 shillings to 2 shillings has produced a movement along the curve from this point A, which was the intersection between that price and the quantity demanded of 6, to point B of the intersection of price of 2 and the quantity demanded of 25. So this is what we are calling as a movement along the demand curve. And this is strictly caused by price changes. There are other factors or other things that may happen in this market. Remember, in every economic model or simplification that we are using to explain phenomena in economics, that this law of holding everything constant, we call it ceteris paribus, applies. So all things held constant, that a price change will produce a movement along the demand curve. Let's then look at what happens then for this curve, because this curve can shift. What can cause this curve to shift? So we move to a shift in the demand curve, and I will explain. So this is shifts in the demand curve. And we are saying a shift in the demand curve can happen in two ways. One is a shift to the right, which signifies an increase. Saying this signifies an increase in overall demand. Then we can have a shift to the right, to the left, a shift to the left, and this shift to the left signifies a decrease in demand. What factors cause this? You have issues to do with, I think we get to the issues, but then let's quickly have a graphical representation of these shifts. So we'll have a Cartesian plane. Here we have quantity, here we have price. I'm always indicating this is y-axis, this is x-axis. Here we have number of units, and let's say this is demand curve, right? Our original demand is here. So demand not like that. When you talk about a shift to the right, then this is what happens. There is a movement this way, and we have a new curve. Let's call that demand 1, demand 1. This signifies an increase, as we said, increase in demand. Then we also said there could be a movement to the left. So a movement to the left is this way. Then the curve will be somewhere there. So we have demand 2 and demand 2. And we said this will signify a decrease in demand. So remember there are two distinctions here. There is increase in demand, which is referring to, an increase or a decrease in demand, which refers to when there is a total shift in terms of the demand curve, either to the right, signifying an increase, or to the left, signifying a decrease in demand. This should not be confused with increase in the quantity demanded or a decrease in the quantity demanded, because an increase in the quantity demanded or a decrease in the quantity demanded is as a result of what we said here. The only factor that may cause that is changes in the prices of goods and services. But in this case, a shift in the demand curve is caused by a few factors which I want us to discuss. And one is tastes and preferences, or tastes and preferences of consumers. So if there is a change in consumer taste and preferences, that may affect the overall demand, the number of consumers, the number of consumers. The other factor is prices of related goods. So remember, it is not the price of the good itself, but prices of related goods. Then we have income. So if there is changes in the income of the consumer, then the last will be expectations, which we can call consumer expectations. So this, we are saying, they are called factors that cause the demand curve to shift. So this explain why the demand curve would either shift to the right or to the left. And I'll start with the first factor, which is a change in taste and preferences of. So we have a change in taste and preferences of the consumers, saying that if consumers prefer to consume one product over the other, and that could be as a result of their own personal reasons, this can cause a shift in terms of the taste and preferences of another product. Then the demand for the specific product that we are discussing will increase. And this will result to a shift in the demand curve to the left. So we had two goods in our first discussion. So here I will have my good X, and here I will have my good Y. So we are saying initially our consumers preferred to consume good X. Then all of a sudden there is a change in terms of the tastes and preferences of the consumers, and they prefer to consume more of Y than of X, meaning that here they will start buying, or and they are willing, and they will start buying more quantities of good Y and less of good X, meaning that the overall demand for good X is going to decrease. And we say that decrease in demand is a shift to the left of the curve. Yeah, that's same thing. If they prefer to consume more of X, then it means the demand for X will increase. Then the curve will shift to the right. That's one of the factors. This is taste and preferences. Then we have the number of consumers is caused by either an increase in the total number of consumers, which we are saying an increase in the total number of consumers will lead to an increase in demand. So if the number of consumers is high, demand will also be high. So increasing number of consumers will shift the demand curve to the right. If the total number of consumers decreases, then we will see that the demand for that particular product will decrease, which means the demand curve will shift to the left. That's on the number of consumers. We come to prices of related goods and services, and we ask ourselves, what are these related goods? We have two types of related goods, and in this case we have here substitutes and complementary. So we have substitute goods and complementary goods. If you talk about or if you say a good is a perfect substitute of another good, it means that this is a good that can be used in the place of the other, and then the consumer will still gain the same economic satisfaction they would have gained from consuming the original good. So a perfect example of substitutes would be coffee and tea. So in the case a consumer would get the same satisfaction from consuming two goods, means that those two goods can become perfect substitutes of the other one. You can take coffee instead of tea. So in this case, when the price of a substitute good falls, the consumers are willing to buy more quantities of that substitute good. So what happens when there is a fall or a reduction in terms of the prices of this substitute good? There will be a reduction in the demand of the original good that these consumers were buying, because because the consumers have shifted from buying our original good, which has maintained in terms of its prices, to preferring to buy more of the substitute good that is costing less. And they have, so in terms of whatever income they have, then their purchasing power relative to the substitute good has increased. So that's what happens in terms of substitute goods. Complementary goods, you find that there are some goods, for example, let me give an example of toothpaste and a toothbrush, or an example of a printer and the inkjets. So printer and inkjets. If you look at these sets of goods, you notice that these are goods that are consumed as a pair. So they are consumed as a pair, meaning that the demand for complementary goods is related. If the price of a complementary good goes up, then we will see that the demand for both goods will decline because they are used together. And in the case the price of a complementary good goes down, then the demand for those two goods will also increase. Then we remember that we said the increase in demand is the curve shifting to the right, and a decrease in demand is the curve shifting to the left. So that explains related goods. Income as a factor that causes the demand curve to shift. Here we look at income again, or the impact of a change in income, as we are saying, depends on whether we are talking about these two types of goods, and we have on one side we have a normal good, and on the other side we have an inferior good. Saying for normal goods, income and demand are directly related, meaning that the demand for goods, for normal goods, increases when income increases. That is the normal goods. The demand for normal goods increases when the income increases, because income and demand for normal goods are directly related. So if there is an increase in income, so we said an increase upwards arrow, here the demand will also increase, and that is for the normal goods. Then looking at the inferior goods, income and demand for inferior goods are inversely related. So that means that if there is an increase in the income of a consumer, an individual, so the consumer's disposable income has gone up, then their demand for inferior goods will decrease. That's the inverse relationship. Let's say, for example, we see a decline in the disposable income of a consumer, then the consumer's demand for these inferior goods will increase. It's the same thing that we are trying to explain. So I think that summarizes income as a factor that causes a shift in the demand curve. And the last factor is consumer expectations. When we are saying that in terms of the expectations, this is expectations about the future. So what are the expectations of consumers about future market trends and things like conditions of prices of goods and services in the market? So you see that when consumers expect that the prices of goods and services will go up in the future, so try to explain this. So we are saying that in terms of expectations, when consumers expect that prices of goods and services, so they are expecting that prices will go up. This is in the near future. They are expecting that prices will go up. They will increase their consumption of those goods and services today. So here is today. What happens is consumption goes up. Where does it go up? Because they expect in the future that the prices of those goods and services will go up. And this consumption could be them increasing the quantities that they are buying, so that some of those quantities are stored for use in the future when prices go up. So, but then the overall effect of this is that demand for goods and services at the present time is going to increase as a result of, and that all of this has been as a result of the expectations the consumers have about the future market trends and trends in terms of conditions of goods, prices, conditions of the prices of goods and services. Let's take another example of an expectation, for example, of consumers. Let's say, for example, consumers expect that in the future the prices of goods and services will go down. So they expect that prices of goods and services in the future will go down. What happens? Maybe they have some key information about accurate and reliable market predictions for the near future. You never know. But they are very confident in terms of the expectations that they have about the future prices of goods and services, that prices will go down. Then it means at the present time, there will be a decrease in the demand for these goods and services. Because why buy now when things are expensive? Consumers will opt to wait up to when this future comes, when they have more purchasing power. So an anticipation of an increase in purchasing power in the future because prices are going down, and it means they'll be able to buy more quantities of goods and services in the future. So if there is an expectation that in the future prices are going down, then we see, yeah, presently consumption goes down, which means there is a decrease. Today, there will be a decrease in demand for goods and services. And this decrease in demands for goods and services, we said, is a shift to the left of the demand curve. So that's the distinction between a movement along the demand curve and shift in the demand curve, which this is a depiction of depiction of the shifts in the demand curve. This is a graphical depiction of movement along the demand curve. And then we've also discussed factors that would cause the demand curve to either shift to the right or to the left. And in summary, we've seen changes in consumer taste and preferences. Number two is changes in the number of consumers, that is the total number of consumers. Number three, we have changes in the prices of related goods and services. And number four is changes in income. Could be an increase in income, the disposable income of the consumer, that is, or a decrease in that. And then we have expectations about future trends in terms of the conditions of prices of goods and services in the market. So that's it. Thank you for following.